Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the next instalment of the Daily Palace podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. I am your host, who is back from a fairly long hiatus on the pod. I've just been on holiday, so don't worry, nothing else has been going on. But yeah, I'm Alex Waite, your host tonight, and I'm joined by Dan Tanner. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing all right. It's glad to see you back, Alex. You've been on the bench for a while. You've been put down in the reserves, and now you come back ready to go. Come on.
Yeah, much like Palace and the mid-season trip to Marbella, I was also been in Spain. Like our paths didn't cross out there, unfortunately, but if they did, I probably would have been looking out for the likes of Eze and Mateta strolling around. But yeah, it's good to be back, man. And yeah, off the bench, injury-free and ready to go for the run-in for Palace this season. Unfortunately, though, I've come back at a bit of a boring time, not for Palace, but in terms of fixtures, because there are none for the next couple of weeks, as it is the international break for us now. We have got quite a few players representing us around the world, though, which is quite nice. So I'll just go through our call-ups for the March International. So for England, we've got Eze, Gehi and Henderson, so no real shocks there. Then Justin Devenny joins up with Northern Ireland. Our US representatives, Chris Richards and Matt Turner. Then we've got the Colombian boys, Munoz and Lerma, going to be doing their stuff down in South America. And then we've got a few England youth players. Wharton, obviously, who got called up for the Euro squad, has dropped back down to the England under-21s, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then Romain Esse has joined up with the under-20s, which is quite a nice addition there. One of our new boys joining up with the younger England teams. So Dan, just out of that list, what are your kind of thoughts on the players that have been called up there? Maybe start with the England guys, Eze, Gehi and Henderson. Is there any surprise, or were you kind of expecting those guys to be in?
Those guys, I think you would expect them to be in. Gehi's always going to be a first choice centre back. Henderson, I think he's got fairly decent shout at least the number 2 spot in the England goalkeepers. He might be pushing for number 1, especially if recent form and some of the mad saves that he's pulled off over the season. I think he probably should be given the number 1 spot, but that's slightly biased. And Eze, he's going to get a call up there. None of those are any real surprises, but there are a couple of other surprises in the England call up, notably Jordan Henderson, which I saw, and I'm not entirely sure why.
Yeah.
Especially when, as we're going to probably talk about in a minute, Wharton is perfectly available. I know, also slightly biased, but on the Palace contingent, I'm not surprised by any of them really. They are kind of regulars in the England squad since Gareth Southgate and even Carsley that took over for that brief sort of couple of games. So I would, and Tershall's definitely going to probably keep them going. They are considered sort of good Premier League players, so them getting in is no real surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite nice, like you say, Tuchel's kind of kept the consistency with a lot of the players that have come in, a lot of the players that are in the squad. And it is good that he's stuck with, especially Eze and Gehi, who have been around for a fair bit in the England setup. Like Gehi just proved his weight in gold, really, at the Euros. And he's been in ever since. He's been, like you say, a first-choice defender. We kind of expect that in the games coming up as well, I suppose. And like you say, Dean Henderson has been outstanding this season for us and has saved us a fair amount of points throughout the season. So I think he could be knocking on the door and challenging Pickford for the number 1. I can't see Pickford being dropped, but if he did get an injury or a knock or anything, I think Henderson's right there and ready to kind of take that spot. So, like you mentioned, Dan, we'll just chat about Wharton as well, because he's just come back from injury, but his form has been outstanding since he's been back. And, he's sort of playing those forward passes that we saw at the end of last season and, being a bit of a disruptor in the midfield and playing really nice football. Were you surprised to see him not in the senior team for this round of international games?
I was very kind of surprised that he's not there. Mainly because, well, as you've just said, the form that he's in has been absolutely phenomenal. Some of the passes are almost Pirlo-esque, and he's doing this at 21. And it's just like, hang on, why is he not getting a call-up? Why is he still in the under-21 squad, which I think, this is probably the last year he's eligible for it. So at some point, he's got to get given that shot. We don't have the greatest depth when it comes to central midfield players in the England squad. We've got Bellingham. We've got Declan Rice. They're number 1 and number 2 selection. They're going to be the starters. But apart from that, there is not the greatest depth, but there is a lot of up-and-coming young players that are definitely going to have to get their shot at some point. And with sort of the ones that we're going up against over this next week or so, why not give them a shot? Because we were sort of the England setup in recent years, especially particularly under Southgate, was very much a let's give these guys that from some of the less well-known clubs or the smaller clubs, let's give them an actual shot at the England positions. Let's see what these guys have got. But it's now come to a little bit more of we've got our starters, but we're just trying to kind of either fill up a spot or we're going to just try and convert players into a position like we did in the Euros by putting Trent Alexander as a central midfielder, which clearly didn't work. So, I don't know why they don't give him a shot. He's far too good to be playing with the under-21s now. I think he probably should be given a chance. He was given a chance in the Euros, and I think he was the only player at the Euros that didn't actually get any game time. Even Luke Shaw, who was injured for most of the tournament, still got about 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. Wharton was the only one that didn't get any time, and we went all the way to the final. So I'm not bitter or anything, but come on, Southgate.
Yeah, nice reminder there of Wharton just being a figure around the England squad for the Euros, when we could have actually done with him in a lot of games, to be fair. But I mean, I kind of get it. Like he's come back from a long-term injury. Maybe it's not the international break to put him in. But when you look at how good he has been, and then like you said earlier, we've got Jordan Henderson there, whose time his time has passed for England. He went to Saudi. It didn't work out. He was playing below standard football out there. He's gone to Ajax. Like, okay, he's had a bit of a revival there, but the Dutch league, I don't know if many of the teams would compare to the English Premier League, where Wharton is playing really well against the best players like in Europe consistently. So it is a bit of a strange one, and definitely in international breaks going forward, you want to see players like Wharton, if he's fit and available, around the England setup. Like, he's a great young player. People want to see him play. He's exciting. I think it'd probably be a no-brainer going forward. But I can kind of see why Tuchel's left him out here. The Henderson situation, I can't get my head around it, man.
I was the same one. I looked at it earlier about why is Henderson there? I had to double check. Went, hang on, what? Why is he there?
Yeah. It's like it's nothing personal, but it's just he's moved on, and he wasn't picked for I think over a year.
There's a reason he wasn't picked for a year.
Yeah,
because we've got some better players now.
Exactly.
I'm not sure why he still made it in when he was there, because he was essentially the captain.
Well, this is it. This is why Tuchel's brought him back, for the leadership element. But you've got the likes of Pickford. You've got Bellingham, who's playing at Real Madrid and has become a leader. You've got Harry Kane there.
We have plenty. We even have Gahey, who is a captain, vice captain. So the leadership reason is kind of moot, really. Yeah. We have professional players that are leaders across the team. So there's got to be another reason why Jordan Henderson is emphasised from the leadership role, because I just don't buy it. Yeah, not with the squad that's been put there. No.
Yeah, let's just say it's not for footballing ability or form. So is there anyone else, Dan, just moving on briefly from England? Is there anyone else in the internationals you might keep an eye on?
I think sort of the Colombian one's always good. The South American sort of ones are always entertaining. They're always at full pelt, and the atmosphere there is just a wall of noise. So they're always fun to watch. The only problem is that they are like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, so you have to watch the highlights in the morning on YouTube. But the commentators are brilliant on that as well. They are much better than ours. There is so much more sort of excitement for everything going on.
Yeah, it's a bit more enthusiasm, like when there's a goal. Like, yeah, when I was out in Spain recently, I was watching Real Betis versus Real Madrid. And just like the commentators are mad. Like someone takes a shot and it goes miles over the bar and they're just like, whoa. Whereas here we're like completely yeah, that was rubbish. Yeah, it's quite funny. But yeah, they're always good. I quite like the look of Justin Devaney with Northern Ireland as well. I think he'll get some game time there. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. Right, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back to give our thoughts on the international break and how it could impact Palace's season going forward.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Welcome back to the Daily Palace podcast. I'm your host today, Alex Waite, and I'm joined by Dan Tanner. And we're talking about the upcoming international break with a handful of Crystal Palace players performing around the world for their respective countries in the coming weeks. So the international breakdown is one that kind of divides fans, I think. Like some people really love to watch England and other nations like go head to head with other countries. Whether it's the Nations League or like World Cup qualifiers that we've got coming up. Then others are on the other side just thinking it's a waste of time and like it impacts the Premier League and all this kind of stuff. Just from like a Palace perspective though, do you see it as like a positive, like, you know, these players can get some more game time and play better level football, that kind of thing? Or do you think it's a negative in like there could be injuries? You know, Palace were in good momentum before this. Like, could it impact that? What do you think about it?
Well, I think the only thing that's really going to impact is like what you say is any kind of injuries, like any long-term injuries, like to sort of key players. Because most of the players on for Palace are going to be sort of maybe second-string players. So, like I said earlier, Gahey's going to be a starter. Muñoz is probably a starter. You might have one or two of the Americans. Turner's probably a starter, but he's a goalkeeper, so them getting injured is not exactly common, but they're usually fine. So you probably shouldn't expect too many from Palace. They are going to be sort of second string or sort of come on for 15, 20 minutes. But there is also that possibility that one of them could get sort of quite seriously injured. So, and we don't have the greatest depth, as we've mentioned multiple times, but we've come through our main injury crisis at the moment. The only ones that are really there are the long-term ones that have been out basically either all season or have aggravated an old injury. So I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem, but it very much is there is a possibility that it could hamper our season. But if you also look at the table, we're kind of perfectly situated. We're not going to get relegated with 10 games to go. We might be able to push up into Europe if we get a bit lucky, but we've got the top 5 of the top 6. I think something like that. I know we're playing City, Arsenal again, so and Liverpool in the final day of the season. So we've got a bit of a tough run, but I think we are relatively fine where we are. If we can nick a couple of points, we might be able to push into Europe, but it's we're fine where we are. I don't expect us to push anymore, so I don't really expect this to be a real big detriment to us. But we'll just have to wait and see in the next week or so, because we do have an FA Cup fixture to worry about, and that is a little bit more important at the moment, I think, which I think we're getting on to later, if I remember the show notes earlier. So we won't go too far into that.
Yeah, it's we will touch on the FA Cup in a bit. But yeah, I mean, if we came back from the international break without any injuries going into that game, it will be, massive for us. It'll be really helpful. Like you mentioned Munoz there, who's just played so much football over the last year or so. He played basically every game for us at the end of last season after he joined. He played the Copa America every game to the final. Well, he missed the final because of suspension. But then he's played almost every game for us this season. Now he's on internationals, like you say, a starter for Colombia, like a key player for Colombia. Something like that, you just sort of, the way that he runs, you're like, okay, this guy's got unlimited energy. But it's just something where you're like, surely something's going to give at some point. Like, that is a bit of a worry for me, like watching him play, because he just plays at such intensity. That is probably my biggest concern is Munoz at this stage. But yeah, I think, to be honest, like the international break, it's come at maybe a good time for us because the fixtures were piling up, and it is Palace to go on a winning streak and then lose a few. So having this little break in between, I think, could suit us quite nicely. Just give us a little bit of a breather heading into the run-in in the latter stages of the season. Before we move on, Dan, I just wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think about the international break in general? Are you a fan of it, or would you do without it if you could?
I generally don't mind it, because when I was growing up, you had like the friendlies and stuff like that. But it's more we're now playing really sort of teams that are not really a competitor to us anymore. So if it's like England, Brazil or something like, or England, France, definitely people are going to pay attention. But playing Latvia, Malta is not really going to get people to sort of watch the internationals, just because we just romp them. Like, we're going into this qualifying stage undefeated. We're just almost walking past teams. But when it comes to the Nations League, we get beaten by Hungary. I don't know what's going on. So, yeah, the Nations League I don't think we really need. It's just another competition that just sort of to generate money, but it's trying to glorify friendlies. Which, yeah, friendlies are only fun when it is the big teams, because as you probably know, when we were growing up, we didn't have world-class players in the Premiership every time. They were in the big clubs and things like that. When you got the likes of Ronaldo or Rivaldo coming to Wembley, that's a big deal. Now nearly all of them are playing the Premiership anyway, so it's like, oh, okay, it's Super Sunday. Okay, I might watch it, I might not. Depends what's on. So it's mainly the way that the game's kind of gone, that they're not as entertaining as they used to be. There's no real draw for them anymore, except for the international tournaments.
Yeah, it sort of feels like there's a bit too much. Like, I kind of understand, you need the qualifiers and stuff to separate the best teams in the world and the best teams in Europe and whatever. But yeah, the Nations League, I've never really got on board with it. Especially the last one where we obviously got relegated and played Ireland, Greece and someone else. But it was just teams that we were expected to be. And there was no sort of competitiveness to it. Just to be honest, it doesn't really do it for me. Either I don't get excited about it, and these upcoming games, okay, if it's on and I'm free, not working or whatever, I will watch. But I don't watch like I watch a Palace match, sit down, focus on it a lot, or I'll actually go to the stadium. It's okay, I'll watch it and do something else in the background. I don't give it my full attention, and I think that just shows. I think a lot of people are like that with England. I don't know many people who make the time to be like, "Oh, England coming up! I'm going to put my couple of hours aside to watch that." It doesn't quite have the same appeal. But yeah, it's just too much for me, to be honest. Right, we're going to move on, and after this short break, we're going to have a little chat about Palace's FA Cup chances later this season. This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day. Hello and welcome back to the final stage of the Daily Palace podcast. I'm Alex Waite and I'm joined by Dan Tanner today. We're just going to close off this episode by looking ahead to Palace's FA Cup run. The guys obviously analysed the Millwall fallout from a couple of weeks ago. There's plenty of talking points from that game.
Extensively. I think me and Joe went on about 15-minute rant one. A little bit too long on one of them.
Well, these games don't come along very often. And, there was plenty of drama in that game for several reasons. But we've moved on now and we're into the quarterfinals, Dan. We've got Fulham ahead of us, Fulham away, which is a very tough game. But if we get over that, we go to Wembley for the first time since 2021, when Vieira was at the helm and we lost to Chelsea in the semi-final. So, Dan, the excitement is building. Excitement/nerves, I must say, about the FA Cup. Do you think we could do the impossible and go all the way this year?
I'm going to believe in it until it's gone. So while we're still in the competition, there is a chance of us winning it. And especially when I think the only major one team that's left in it, I think is City. I think it's theirs to lose. So everybody else, it's fair game. And we've got Fulham, who we've had, I think they won one game, we won the other. So decent sort of record, both sides, so it can go either way. We're on a decent bit of form. They're not quite so much. I think there's slightly dropped off a bit, but they're still competitive. They are not going to be pushovers. So, I'm going to be going for it until we're technically out. So if we can get a trip to Wembley, that'd be great. If we can get GSPN to pay for us to go to Wembley, even better, but I don't see that happening. You guys have got to start subscribing more. But we can only hope.
Yeah, I think we should start a GoFundMe page to get us to Wembley somehow. If we get there, that is. I'm not going to go and watch Fulham.
Even if we don't, we'll just get a GoFundMe. We'll let us go to the FA Cup final, even if we're not.
Even if Fulham beat us, we'll tap up the GSPN Fulham guys and see if we can sneak in with them and tag on to their glory. But yeah, I think for me, like the FA Cup excitement is really building, and I think because we obviously eliminated Millwall, and then because we beat Fulham recently, it's sort of given a sense of hope that we can get over the line against Fulham. And just the way that Glasner's approached the Cup is really positive. He's obviously taken it very seriously, playing a full-strength team, which is, I think, really important for the fans to see that he's really going for it. And I can just see us being at Wembley in a few weeks, in late April, with Glasner on the touchline. Like, for me, it's just given me a nice gut feeling that we might, get to the semi-final. So I'm quite hopeful of that this year. But even if we don't, I think, on the whole, it's been a positive season. Like, we obviously had the terrible start, but Glasner's turned it round and things are looking more rosy now, which is nice. But yeah, fingers crossed that we can get to Wembley and not be watching England.
Not do a Palace and smeg it up, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, we've got obviously the 2016 Cup final etched in our memory for positive and negative reasons. The most negative being that we lost, but then the other minor negative was Pardew's dancing on the touchline.
Oh, that's amazing, that dance. You put in Palace meme, that's like one of the first things there.
Yeah, there's not many Palace memes around, but that's
No,
one.
look it up, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing. Can you? I can't see Glasner doing that though. He's a bit cooler, isn't he? He's
bit more stoic. He'll be serious, straight down the line. He'll be strong and content.
In the hot autumn, in the warm April sun, be wearing his turtleneck jumper probably. Looking the part, but I'm feeling good about the FA Cup this season. But yeah, even if we don't get past Fulham, I think we'll be proud of the lads and how they've gone about it. But if we do get through, then we'll see each other at Wembley for a big day out with the Palace. So fingers crossed. Right, that's been the Daily Palace podcast today. Just want to say a big thank you to Dan for joining me. Thanks, mate.
No worries, always a pleasure.
Nice one. And we'll be back next week to talk more Palace international action. So stick with us then.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.